a second to settle in. It's our first time being together since the end of the academic year, so I hope everyone has found some time to rest and recharge. I know many of you all have been working hard throughout the legislative session, so hopefully you found some time for yourselves, but we'll give folks a minute to settle in, and then we'll get started. Okay. Welcome to the Educator Preparation Certification and Enforcement Stakeholder Meeting. This is, I believe, our third official newly rebranded EPCE stakeholder meeting. So excited to see faces here. I know we've continued to have additional folks join this meeting space over time. And so by way of introduction, I'm Jessica McLaughlin. I'm our Associate Commissioner over Educator Preparation, Certification, and Enforcement, and excited to be here with you today with my team. If we can move to the next slide. Thanks. Just a few norms to start us off. If folks wouldn't mind doing a quick introduction of themselves in the chat, it's always good to see who's in the room. First norm is to please mute yourself when you are not speaking, and to leave your camera on if possible. It's great to be able to see folks in the space. It's also helpful for us and for others if you're able to rename yourself with your organization. And then I really want to encourage active participation throughout today. We have a lot of opportunity to pause and discuss. So we're going to have another Padlet like we used last go around. Really want to make sure we're gathering as much input and feedback from the field as possible. So I'll look forward to your active participation. If we go to the next slide. I just wanted to, again, naming that there are a number of folks that are new to this stakeholder space. And frankly, might be new to the work of the State Board for Educator Certification, or SBEC in particular. We just wanted to take a little bit of time over these next few meetings just to reground in kind of the purpose of the SBEC and their work, and some of their processes overall. So first, grounding in the SBEC's mission statement and core principles that are focused on improving student achievement and ensuring the safety and welfare of our Texas children by holding the highest level of educator preparation, performance, continuing education, and standards of conduct. And you can see the SBEC's core principles down below. The SBEC meets multiple times a year. Their next meeting is slated for the end of July, so July 24th and 25th. In the summer, the SBEC traditionally does a work session opportunity to kind of really set their vision for the upcoming academic year, and then holds their traditional meeting on the Friday. So we do anticipate a work session and meeting during this July session. If we go to the next slide. Just a little bit of grounding in the SBEC's preparation, certification, and enforcement process. The SBEC has a broad range of oversight regarding kind of the entire life cycle of an educator, everything from admission into an educator preparation program through continuing professional education and certificate renewal. So we have a diverse set of stakeholders here on this call, knowing that the SBEC engages with stakeholders in educator preparation, stakeholders who work in district HR systems, stakeholders who work in talent pathway systems, et cetera, ensuring that all those stakeholders have an opportunity to provide meaningful input on the process. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. Just as a reminder, the SBEC's rulemaking process, they follow a kind of a formal structured cadence in which the SBEC begins by engaging in discussion related to key pieces of policy. Those pieces of policy and those discussions might be driven by input from stakeholders. Many pieces of policy that the SBEC's considered have come from this stakeholder space in the past. They might also come preview of some slides ahead from legislative action. The SBEC might be charged by the legislature with taking specific action, and then they begin to discuss what it looks like to put the rules in place to operationalize those requirements. From there, there's a formal rulemaking process through proposal and then adoption. That's where the board votes on the texts of the rules themselves. And then after that formal process with the SBEC, the rules go to the State Board of Education for their review. And the State Board of Education has the statutory authority to veto the SBEC rules with a 2/3. So overall, I show this because frankly, the rulemaking process is, I think, new to many, but also to say that this is not a fast process from start to finish. On the speedier side, we're looking at about 9 months, but we think that there's a lot of value and benefit in that. Quality, we need to move at the speed of quality, and quality in many cases takes time. And the benefit of this type of process is that there's many opportunities for us to intentionally pause and seek input from stakeholders in the field. If we go to the next slide, just reinforcing, we heard from you all as we sought to stand up this EPCE stakeholder group, that really the goal here was to be able to gather and provide input and feedback and actively collaborate across a varied set of stakeholders on topics related to the broader set of work that the SBEC oversees. So not just educator preparation, but also certification, enforcement, and the broader slate of educator support systems. Really ensuring we were able to pull in experts, pull in stakeholders from across the field in order to provide meaningful recommendations to the SBEC and support practices of our TEA team that supports the SBEC's work. If we go to the next slide, we again are on our third meeting of this reformulated EPCE stakeholder group. We've really appreciated the feedback that this group has provided to us after each of our meetings so far. We will close today's session with another feedback survey from y'all. Again, really trying in that spirit of continuous improvement to make sure that these spaces are meaningful and that folks feel like they're able to really lean in around the topics that they care about. And if you go to the next slide, just a few norms and expectations, both on the EPCE stakeholder side and the TEA staff side, for us to continue to reground in. And again, these came from a survey that we sent out last summer asking this group what type of norms should we bring to this space together. And then in the next slide, want to give a preview of today's agenda. There's a lot on it. And we've got a few meaty topics at hand. We wanted to start by acknowledging that we just came out of a legislative session. And so we are days out of the legislative session. And frankly, we're still in the period in which the governor is in the process of reviewing and considering signature on bills. But we have some near-term updates for you. And then we've got sort of a broad slate of topics at hand, including discussing our teacher mentorship training, talking about the most recent SBEC meeting, and some highlights from that, an overview of some recent work around the core subjects, exams, and the TTEP performance assessment, updates on our special education personnel assignments, and the CAR redesign work, and some updates we're considering around Chapter 231, before we give an opportunity for a quick preview of what's on deck for June SBOE and July SBEC. And then we will take time at the end for any additional questions, but y'all feel free to put questions in the chat. There's going to be time where we're going to ask for folks to, come off mute and discuss topics. And then we also have a Padlet that will be at certain points pointing folks to for input. If we go to the next slide, if I did my segue correct, we will be at certain points today directing you to navigate to a Padlet for input. So we will be dropping the link to that Padlet in the chat. Padlets are, thanks, Jess. So just put the link to the Padlet in the chat. If you look at this slide, you'll see kind of this is from our last meeting, but examples of topics that we'll be seeking your input on across the top. Will direct you in the course of today's discussion when we would like you to go to the Padlet. And you simply just press the plus button below the vertical column that you're wanting to respond to add a comment or respond to a question. There's also should be a column for general questions as well. And I'll say that questions that aren't addressed today, we will certainly follow up in additional communication. You can also do nifty things like reply to other people's comments, put a heart next to someone else's comment. So encourage folks to use this Padlet given that we are a relatively large group today, as a way to also capture your thoughts and thinking. With that, then wanted to transition to the first topic at hand, which is the 89th Texas legislative session. So as I think many of you all know, the legislature, we recently just last week, last week, oh my gosh, feels like a lifetime ago and like not a day has passed. Last week was the end of the legislative session. And so we have some early updates on work that impacts the SBEC that came out of this most recent legislative session. So if we go to the next slide. Wanted to highlight a few pieces of legislation that in our team's analysis would be related to the work of the State Board for Educator Certification. So I think the first bill, and likely probably the bill of biggest note, is House Bill 2. So this is the Omnibus School Finance Bill that was passed and has been signed by the governor into law. This bill includes a lot of stuff. It has 7 articles to it, but I think for the purposes of the SBEC and the work of educator preparation, certification, and enforcement, there are a few areas of particular note. And those are in Article 2 and Article 3 of the bill. Article 2 of the bill is specifically focused on policies related to educator preparation and certification. A few highlights here to summarize some of the key things that can be found in this article. It includes limiting uncertified teachers in foundational subjects, beginning with K-5 reading and math teachers in the 26-27 academic year, and all other grade levels in 27-28, with the ability of a district to be able to extend that timeline out to the 29-30 academic year. It couples that with some supports, including a $1,000 grant per uncertified teacher who is certified by 26-27 that would flow to school districts to support. And then the bill establishes a set of new high quality pre-service preparation pathways. And I use new, I think, with like a little bit of caveat, given that many of these are work that you all have been engaged in for many years now. So it codifies in statute a residency, a traditional preparation, and a alternative preparation pathway, and specifically differentiates between what we've currently considered alternative certification pathways in a new pre-service alternative preparation model. And then coupled with these new pre-service preparation pathways is a significant infusion of dollars into the educator preparation space. And this is through what is coined the Preparing and Retaining Educators Through Partnership, or PREP. Love a nifty acronym. The PREP allotment. And this PREP allotment is really grounded in, if we kind of look at some of the recommendations from the Teacher Vacancy Task Force, we can see a lot of alignment between recommendations from that body and what is ultimately codified in this allotment, really focused on supports for recruitment of individuals into the profession through new state funding for teacher recruitment via Grow Your Own pathways, focus on the the quality preparation of candidates through new state funding for preparation. So paying for the costs of training candidates before they begin teaching, i.e., providing funding to candidates, school districts, and preparation programs for those partnerships that implement residency, traditional, or the pre-service alternative model. And then lastly, ensuring that once we have teachers in the door, that they are provided high quality mentorship and support. And so here there's also increased state funding for new teacher mentorship. As many of you know, we've had the mentor program allotment for many years. This really takes and expands the scope of that work significantly. And then I would say kind of a final note around HB2, it also does specify some parameters in which school districts must pay novice teachers that went through the residency, traditional, or pre-service pathways more than novice teachers who went through all other pathways. But they have flexibility on how they do that. So that's just Article 2. Article 3 of HB2 has been coined Educator Bill of Rights. I think there's a lot of stuff in Article 3, but I think the things of note to the work of the SBEC specifically relates to a provision that waives certification fees for bilingual and special education teachers. That includes a first test attempt for the content pedagogy certification exam and the certification application fee. It also specifies some parameters for the BTLPT, which, good news, we're already moving in that direction with the redesign of the bilingual Spanish certification exam. And then includes a broad bucket of what's called teacher quality assistance grants to support strategic compensation, staffing, scheduling, et cetera, focused on that includes reference to teacher leadership and mentorship, and teacher apprenticeships. I would say, so those are some of the highlights of HB2. There's a ton of other important and connected work there, but just things, again, pulling out pieces that connect to the work of the SBEC. I'm going to pause for a second and actually look at the chat before I go on to these other pieces of legislation. And I will say, I know I am giving the 30,000-foot view of this legislation, and just to name, there will be many communication documents, guidance tools, et cetera, that will be coming out in the coming weeks and months, but wanted to at least orient folks to kind of the high level content that is within this. So I think, Katie, to your question around when will guidance be released, that is an excellent question and one that we are working on, hoping to have a timeline of when guidance will be released to the field here shortly. So know that we're getting a lot of questions. We will have a centralized email inbox to receive questions. And then later in today's session, we'll be sharing some information around some input sessions that we'll be hosting, because I think part of what we hope to do is collaborate with the field on some of the finer grained points of these systems. And then Rainey just said it's preparing and retaining educators through partnership is what PREP stands for. Oh, and thank you, Sherry. You already had that answer in there for me. So again, 30,000-foot view, many more communication tools to come, but wanted to make sure folks at least had awareness of the exciting components that are within this big bill. In addition to HB2, Senate Bill 571 includes kind of some real strengthening of educator misconduct parameters, including closing some of the loopholes related to currently uncertified educators, and really strengthening some of the reporting requirements overall, as well as establishing a temporary suspension authority for the SBEC for those educators who might present imminent harm to students. Again, a lot of work to be done with the SBEC to define parameters around this legislation. Two other kind of quick hits to call your attention to. HB 2243 establishes a new commission on teacher job satisfaction and retention. This would be made up of educators and legislators who would really dig deep into, I think, kind of like part two of the teacher vacancy task force, dive a little bit deeper into some of the parameters around ensuring we're removing all unnecessary burdens from teachers, et cetera, and really trying to understand ways that we can further support teacher job satisfaction and retention. And then lastly, HB 1178 creates a temporary certificate for out-of-state educators, trying to engage in that continuous improvement process of streamlining a transition to Texas for those who are coming from out of state. I did, so just to name up front, HB2 has been signed by the governor into law. The remaining three bills have passed both chambers, but are still with the governor for his contemplation. So that is my upfront caveat there. And then I see, Donna, I see your question around what do we mean by pre-service alternative certification model. Again, we will share additional guidance here in the coming weeks, but I would direct you to the link. It's within Article 2 of the bill. I would go and look at the parameters that are outlined within there. I think that's a good starting point. All right. With that, if we could transition to the next slide. I think I've already named these things, but a few other things to name. The SBEC during their work session on July 24th will be spending the entirety of the day digging into this legislation, specifically HB2 and SB 571. Really here to build shared understanding of what's included there, discuss some of the kind of critical decision points that are ahead of the board. And our goal would be coming out of that work session to then bring that information to stakeholder input sessions throughout the entirety of the summer, some of them starting as early as the next few weeks here. And then our plan would be that our August 8th EPCE stakeholder meeting, we'd be all really collectively rolling up our sleeves and diving into some of the finer grain details of components of this legislation, in particular HB2 and this prep allotment, moving towards go there. And then I think if some of y'all were around when HB3 passed in 2019, there was a whole bunch of communication documents and tools that were established by the agency. And so we do anticipate a dedicated website, dedicated email address, and kind of a slate of communication tools that will be developed and administered over the coming weeks and months. I will say a near-term communication tool that you can anticipate here before the end of the month would be communication around the process for this certification fee waivers. That is kind of an immediate next step that we think is pretty urgent to be able to communicate to the field. Stephen, I see your question in the chat. Again, we will have more information around the specific funding here in the coming weeks, but the prep allotment is specified as an entitlement under Chapter 48. So if that's a good place to start. Then with that, I'm happy to continue to capture questions in the chat, but I do know we've got a pretty packed agenda today, and know that there will be lots of communication on this here in the future. So with that, I am going to pivot and pass it over to, I believe, Allie to talk about some work that's connected to this.
Thanks, Jess. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. Thanks for having me here. I wanted to bring some updates on the Texas mentorship training to this group. Several months ago, we shared in a couple meetings some of this work, but I would love to start off with kind of an overview of what this is. So if we could move forward to slides. Next one, thanks. A couple focused questions. I'll give you all just a moment to read through those focused questions in the previous slide. If you go back to, sorry. There we go. Oh. Maybe y'all just a moment to read these questions for our time together today. Right, so I think someone might be able to drop our Padlet into the chat, and I will have some pause points throughout. I did want to name that we'll probably spend time, hopefully for some folks to chime in on the first question, and then the second and third questions, I'll ask for your feedback either on the Padlet or in our follow-up survey. The idea is we kind of scratch the surface with questions 2 and 3, and then bring it back as needed for a further discussion in our August EPCE meeting. On the next slide, we have a little overview on where the Texas Mentorship Training came from. So back, for those of you that recall, the Teacher Vacancy Task Force had some set of recommendations around compensation, training and support, and working conditions. And specifically, there are a set of recommendations around expanding teacher mentorship and leadership. On the next slide, I'll give you a moment to read through recommendations A through C that the Teacher Vacancy Task Force had. You can go to the next slide, that would be great. Give you just a second to read over these. So the development of the Texas Mentorship Training is directly related to recommendation A, which is developing those suites of training. Also, last legislative session, there was not an increase for the mentor program allotment, but as just mentioned, there is scaling of mentorship supports through HB2 that was just passed this legislative session. And then obviously mentorship is a form of teacher leadership. The next slide will recap some of what Jess had mentioned. So some particular places in HB2. You'll see mentorship is under 21907, which is a new section of the Texas Education Code. And then Chapter 48 is the entitlement to fund these programs. And again, we'll have more information on funding for each of these programs out to the field soon. In the next slide, a couple, just wanted to start with the vision and goals for the Texas Mentorship Training. We really are focused on ensuring that all beginning teachers in Texas receive the guidance and support needed to thrive, leading to increased teacher effectiveness, retention, and a lasting impact on student outcomes. On the next slide, we have a little visual of how this Texas Mentorship Training is set up. So at the top of the pyramid, you'll see pre and early service teachers that are supported by a group of current classroom teachers that serve as mentors, cooperating teachers for traditional candidates, and host teachers for residents. And then supporting those individuals, we've got EPP staff and district and campus leaders. So those blue boxes relate to different pathways of the Texas Mentorship Training. So we've got 3 total pathways, one for mentors, cooperating teachers, and host teachers, another for EPP staff, including field supervisors, and then another pathway for district and campus leaders. And those district and campus leaders is more of like technical assistance and design sessions about setting up a mentoring program. On the next slide, those of you that were with me a while back, you can click through the animations. Sorry, we've got candidates and residents on the left side of the screen, and then kind of on the right side, we've got interns. If you click one more time, note to self to take these animations off. Potentially beginning teachers that are in-service teachers, and if you click down, we've got cooperating teachers, host teachers, and mentors supporting them. Sometimes you might have one individual serving in multiple roles. You could have a cooperating teacher who is also a mentor to a first-year teacher down the hall that may be certified, may be uncertified. Year to year could have been a candidate that went through different preparation programs. If you click once more, this visual just shows that then we've got EPP and field supervisors supporting these individuals, collaborating with them, and district and campus leaders. So part of the vision of the Texas Mentorship Training is to align and cohere the supports for these frontline mentoring educators and the pre-service and early service teachers that they support. On the next slide, we just have a quick definition of who those Pathway 1 mentoring educators are. I know that folks call these roles lots of different things out in the field, and it's hard sometimes when you've got a term that you're used to using to transition to a new one. But on the left side, we've got 4 terms that come from our Texas policy. they are sometimes called different things in districts or campuses, but I'll give you a second just to read over who these folks are for our Pathway 1 training. All right, moving along, just wanted to call out a couple policy connections and foundations for this training. So on the next slide, we'll see a couple call outs to policy. So this training is really rooted in the requirements in Chapter 228 for those mentoring educators and field supervisors, and also the Administrative Code 153, which is the mentor program allotment, will also operate under the new requirements in HB2. And we think that this training program could be leveraged by district and EPP partnerships to meet some of the requirements outlined in HB2. I did want to call out here, and I'll bring this up at the end, if you're interested in attending a rulemaking feedback session, we've got some coming up on the 23rd and 24th, and you'll have the opportunity to indicate interest in your post-meeting survey. And I see at least one person on here that has provided input previously on some of our in-service mentoring rules. Thanks for that. On the next slide, we can run through these relatively quickly, because I know we don't have a ton of time. I just wanted to call out, in addition, the foundations for this program are really rooted in our new classroom teacher pedagogy standards and look to align to high quality instructional materials implementation, high leverage instructional leadership practices, given that these mentors and teacher leaders, this is often like skill building and prep to expand their reach, either as a teacher leader that stays in the classroom or some that might move on to other roles, effective teacher prep and strategic staffing initiatives. All right. Next, I'll just be quiet on these next few slides. These are our competencies, kind of competency domains for our mentoring educators. And then for our district and campus leaders. Just to give you a flavor of what the training entails. On the next slide, you'll see Pathway 3, which is our EPP staff and field supervisor training. We don't have the competencies developed yet. We will start working on that later in the summer. We kind of staggered the development of this training. And so this is an area that I would love your feedback. On the next, in a couple slides, we'll pause there. But what we do know for this Pathway 3 ed prep and field supervisor training, that we are going to start with competencies, right? And like backwards design first is like, what skills are we looking to develop, what knowledge? And we will root this in the EPF, the effective preparation framework, and the requirements outlined in Chapter 228 of our administrative code. On the next slide, here's an example also of how we will leverage what we've already developed. So we anticipate leveraging some of those Pathway 1 competencies for mentoring educators, given that they're out observing, they're co-teaching, they're providing feedback, they're working with teachers on how to set up a strong learning environment. Those are things that field supervisors should be able to do as well. So we'll use that as a kind of a jumping off point, and then layer on pieces such as candidate evaluation and really double down on like the coaching and feedback aspects as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we think we'll head with this, but I did want to take a few moments here on the next slide and just ask this group, and you can come off a mute or put this in the Padlet. What needs would you all like to see addressed through updated field supervisor training? Yes, thank you for that clarification, Sherry. Yes, this will be a kind of a revamp and update of the current field supervisor training for school year 26-27. So if you kind of had a wish list of like, hey, in the current field supervisor training, I love XYZ, like let's keep that. That's an important need in the field. Let us know. Or like, I have a wish list of something I think my field supervisors would really benefit from. Or in my experience as a field supervisor, I wish I had more of XYZ. Thanks, Calvin. I see a note about evidence impact coaching practices. Mm-hmm. I know it's a big group. Okay, internalization processes of HQIM. Yeah, that's something we've been intentionally designing around for pathway 1 and something we hope to carry into this pathway. I appreciate this. I know the tendency sometimes to want to put things in chat in a big group like this, but I see co-teaching and co-planning. Yes, we know that will be that resonates for sure. Great, Sherry. Thanks for that call out in that connection to the approval process to CAR. And I think that was a missed opportunity to call that out on the slide, but definitely alignment there across the approval, the review process. Great. Well, feel free to add some other comments in the chat or in the Padlet. We will also ask this question if you kind of like, we'll go through a bit more content. It might spark some ideas. We'll ask this on the follow-up survey. So definitely feel free to share there as well. Okay, thanks, Susan. Yeah, like understanding the experience of the candidates and the cert requirements. I appreciate that. All right, on our next slide, the last 2 questions I have for you all, we'll just do asynchronously. So again, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Padlet, and they'll also be in the follow-up survey. But given time, I'll just keep us moving. Pathway 1, this mentoring educator training includes a full day summer kickoff and some shorter trainings throughout the year. Again, this is for cooperating and host teachers and then mentor teachers. So this is just a quick visual of what that looks like. Pathway 2 for district and campus leaders that are overseeing a mentoring program. Again, this is like trying to bring together the like mentorship that happens in the pre-service space with the early service space, given oftentimes it is the same teacher serving in multiple roles to support pre-service and early service teachers. So on the next slide, we have a visual of kind of this scope and sequence, if you will, of the technical assistance that would be provided to these district and campus leaders. So in the spring, that blue kind of box is a vision setting and performance management setup. So if the district, working with the district side by side to look at the vision for the mentoring program, if there are goals already established, are there goals that they want to tweak? If there aren't explicit goals, are there goals the district want to set? So these are design sessions where the trainers are going in kind of side by side and working through facilitated work time for those pieces. Next is strategic planning for mentoring. So I think the text is really, if you go back, sorry, I said next, but I meant kind of like the next box on the previous slide. Strategic planning for mentoring is engaging in work around mentor selection. So we know in chapter 228, there are specific requirements around the qualifications for these individuals, and then thinking about what that selection process will look like. You know, are there practices of going through recruitment and selection, or is it kind of assigning people into those roles? So trying to figure out where the district is and where they might want to move to with some of those practices. And then setting up time for that mentoring to happen, like thinking about those mentors that are in their internship experience, like where is there time in the school day that's protected for these teachers to meet? That's not like, oh, meet during your lunch period or find time after school, or like you got your planning period. Like, yeah, a planning period is time, but that's a lot for like an intern, right? Or your first year teacher. So trying to support them in setting that up. And then the last 2 kind of steps here are program expansion and support structures, and then reviewing and kind of like integrating into ongoing support. So this next question that I would ask for you to, pathway 2, sorry, I just saw a question in the chat. Will pathway 2 be required training? That is a really great question. This training will be a requirement for folks that are engaging the way that we are envisioning it now in the prep allotment for mentorship. The reason being that there are statutory requirements for district and campus leaders that support or work with beginning teachers to receive training. So what we are trying to do is provide this service to the field to fulfill that statutory requirement to then access the funds. And again, we decided to design this not as face-to-face, like sit and get training, but design sessions to be able to differentiate based on where the districts are, because we know there's so many districts that have really robust mentoring programs in place, and the support would be around how do we take what you have, tweak it or refine it, and keep working towards those goals that we have set. So the next question for the Padlet or the follow-up survey on the next slide is, what role could or should EPP staff play in Pathway 2 mentoring program design sessions? So there are pieces there that we'll be working alongside districts to help clarify, selection criteria for both the pre-service mentoring educators and the in-service mentoring educators. We're trying to bridge that kind of baton pass. So I would be curious to hear what you all think about that. Again, feel free to drop that in the Padlet or your post-session survey. Just got a few more slides really to tee up the last question that I have for you all, and then I'll pass it off to our next topic. On the next slide, just a quick timeline of where we are. Our initial thinking was that ESCs would ultimately redeliver all pathways of the Texas mentorship training. So a snapshot of kind of 3 years of development, testing, and launch. In this past school year, US Prep, as our partner, has been developing and piloting the training. In this upcoming school year, they're going to continue piloting Pathway 1 and 2 training, and then develop that third pathway, which is the EPP Field Supervisor training. And then in 26-27, ESCs would redeliver the pathways to the field. So we've got ESC staff already they're just starting this summer at each of our regional service centers to support the implementation of this program. The next slide shows our delivery train, starting with US Prep. You can kind of think of it as like US Prep at the top with a TEA partnership, working on designing this training ESC mentoring fellows in that second gray box. I'll give you just 1 second to read the key on the left side. There's lots of arrows, lots of boxes here. So the ESC mentoring fellows would deliver that training and provide ongoing support and coaching to the 3 pathways that would then provide that support to pre-service and early service teachers. I will say one piece that we're contemplating is this third pathway, the EPP staff, including field supervisors. You see a little dotted line down to cooperating and host teachers. We're wondering what the interest is, benefits, potential challenges of EPP staff engaging a TOT to redeliver this training to those Pathway 1 mentoring educators. So that is the third question. I think it's a big one. I would love to discuss it with this group. My thinking was I wanted to bring this initial question to the group today, get some written feedback, and then come back later in the summer in our August EPCE meeting and dive a little bit deeper into this question. So our second to last slide, y'all are like, when are you wrapping up? There's 15 other topics to get to. Feedback survey. What are the benefits of providing a training of trainer option for EPP staff via Pathway 3 to redeliver Pathway 1 training to mentoring educators? And then what challenges and maybe solutions would exist? On the last slide, so you can provide some input, some initial input on the Padlet or the survey, and know that we will come back to this later in the summer. I just wanted to call out a couple of structures. We're going to continue to gather stakeholder feedback. One is through these EPCE meetings in August. The second is through just-in-time input. An example of that is this rulemaking feedback session on HB2's prep allotment, including mentorship. And we anticipate having more of those where we can do a deeper dive, because we've got so many topics in these EPCE meetings, which is great. And then we have a stakeholder advisory committee. I know some of the people on this call are on that advisory committee that met throughout last year and will continue to meet into next year. Okay, so in terms of anticipated cost for the training offered by ESCs, we're continuing to work on that. And part of our work in the coming months is working with ESCs to develop business models to make this service available out to the field. Holly HB2 asking if it limits the number of participants for prep mentor partnership programs. Yes, there are some caps on the number of beginning teachers. So those first and second year teachers that could be funded, that's 40. But then there are also some districts could also use some funding in other areas of the prep allotment to support this work. Katie, I would love to ask your question about would this replace what we at EPPs have to provide for training? I think we can come back to this potentially in August as we talk a little bit more about, I see several questions here about costs and like funding that you'll get from the state and then costs for EPPs and other stakeholders. So we can dig into that a little bit later. But I'm looking at time and I don't want to take more time from the rest of the group. So I can follow up with these questions either one off or in our August meeting. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Allie. Appreciate it. So a chance to kind of dig into some future-facing work with the outcome of legislative session and work underway with our teacher mentorship work. But there also was an SBEC meeting since we were all last together. The SBEC met in April. And if we go to the next slide, there were a number of actions that they took collectively. They moved to adopt a rule review and a review of their and some slight updates to their administrative rules, and then took the opportunity to approve an additional set of programs to offer the teacher residency preparation route, and approved 2 new EPPs. And then voted a proposal on updates to the Chapter 235 special education and bilingual education certification standards. So for context, as many of you know, the board has been working for a number of years to develop and codify a combined bilingual special education certification and associated educator standards, and has taken the opportunity to take what's currently subchapter F and subchapter G of their educator standards, which were special education and bilingual education respectively, and combine them into one new subchapter F, so that there's clear coherence across the standalone special education and bilingual education standards and this new cohered bilingual special education set of standards. So they voted on these as a proposal at their last meeting, and we anticipate them coming back to these standards at adoption in July. And then lastly, they had an opportunity to discuss updates to Texas test development and our performance assessment development, as well as our accountability rules, which team members are going to give you all an update on here next. Then with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. I'm not going to be long here, but I just wanted to provide an update on where we're at in Chapter 229, which is the accountability system for educator prep, April discussion, and kind of the next steps here. On the next slide here, so we provide just kind of the high level where we're at in the process. So as a reminder, last fall, beginning in September, the SBEC adopted Chapter 229. In November, the SBOE provided final approval of the rules, and we sent notifications to EPPs of their recommended statuses. In February, the SBEC approved all the ratings. Again, in February, we had a data working group meeting that started the process towards discussion in April. In April, we had a discussion with the SBEC on proposed updates for the 24-25 reporting year. And in July, we anticipate bringing a proposal item from that discussion. On the next slide, so just to kind of give you like what's driving us to do changes each year. This year, there were 5 things that drove us to do a variety of things in our discussion item in April. that includes the board provides us guidance and questions at any time we bring chapter 229 to the board. We had stakeholder input, specifically that data working group, but we also hear from you guys regularly throughout the year, and we take that information in to help inform our process. We continually pay attention to rule changes in other chapters and apply that to chapter 229 when it's appropriate. We gain wisdom by just calculating ASAP or performing the ASAP evaluation each year. And finally, we do review all the rules to make sure there's clarity in them each year. On the next slide, so we had 6 categories that we discussed with the board in April. They included a proposed change to the small group process, the process for implementing the student growth standard, updates to the closure procedures that are tied to chapter 229, a shift in the chapter that commendations are found, a shift in how not rated status is applied, and finally just normal manual and rule language enhancements. And then finally, just some additional information. If you would, if any of those topics caught your eye, I would encourage you to go to the April SBEC item and review that to see what we were up to. We also are bringing a proposal in July for chapter 229. And that's all I got here. So happy to field any questions if there are any, but otherwise we can keep moving.
Thanks, Jeremy. Again, if folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the Padlet or in the chat. But appreciate you and your team's continued engagement on this. If we transition to the next section, we've got an update on test development. So I'm going to turn it over to Kay and DeMarco.
Alrighty, greetings everyone. Can you hear me, Jessica? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, great. I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Kay Jernigan. Nice to meet you. This is my first time at an EPCE meeting presenting. I serve as a test development specialist on the Educator Standards and Testing team, and I lead the development for the new Core EC6 Bilingual Education Spanish and English as a Second Language exams. So right now, 1 second. We're going to go over a brief testing update here. So just to keep in mind, give me 1 second. All right, here we are. So of course, we consider our students and educator candidates. So SBEC has worked to identify opportunities to streamline exam content and made it a priority to incorporate stakeholder feedback into the exam development process. So over the next few years, several exams will be redesigned with these aims in mind. So starting this fall, the revised Special Education Specialist EC12 and Deafblind EC12 exams will launch. The following year, in September 2026, the Bilingual Education Spanish Supplemental EC12 exam will launch. In 2027, phase 1 of the new Core EC6 exam and the new Texas Test of Educator Proficiency, known as TTEP, will launch, pending SBEC action. And lastly, in September 2028, the second phase of the new Core EC6 exam, the revised English as a Second Language, and the bilingual special education exams will launch. I don't know what happened to my golden rectangles, but we're going to pretend they're there. So as you can see, we're working hard to improve the preparation exams for our educators, but today we're going to focus on the upcoming redesigned Core EC6 exam, formerly Core Subjects EC6, and the Texas Test of Educator Proficiency, which will be known as TTEP. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, there they are. Voila. Okay, so just to give you a little background on the current Core Subjects EC6 exam. So core subjects EC6 candidates must pass pedagogy, science of teaching, reading, and the core subjects exam that includes a 5 subtest model of ELAR, math, science, social studies, and a subtest that covers, of course, fine arts, health, and physical education to earn certification. Passing all 5 of the subtests is required for candidates to be recommended for a core subjects EC6 certificate. And lastly, candidates are allotted a 5 retake. Are allotted 5 retake attempts. So just you can go to the next slide. Alrighty, so scheduled to launch in 2027 and 28 is a new core EC6 exam. So this exam was updated to offer candidates more flexibility and the opportunities to earn certificates in high needs areas. So candidates have 2 options. They can elect to take a 4 subtest exam, which will include the base content areas of ELAR, math, science, and social studies, or they can take a 5 subtest exam that includes the 4 core subjects I just named, plus one of the following specialty subtests. So that would still include fine arts, health, and PE, also include special education, ESL, and bilingual Spanish proficiency. You can go to the next slide. All right, so in 2027, phase 1 of the new core EC6 exam will launch, offering candidates 3 certificate pathways. So candidates must pass, of course, pedagogy, the science of teaching and reading, and choose either the 4 subtest or 5 subtest exam option, and they're displayed on the screen. So candidates who select the 4 subtest model would take subtests that cover the core content of math, ELAR, science, and social studies. So once they pass all of the required subtests and met all other certification requirements, they will be eligible for recommendation for the base core EC6 certificate, which is listed at the top of the pathways. And then the second option is for candidates who elect the 5 subtest exam model. So that will still include our 4 core content areas of math, ELAR, science, and social studies, but it will also include a 5th specialty subtest that would include either fine arts, health, PE, or special education. So once they pass all the requirements and other certification requirements, they would be eligible for recommendation for the corresponding core EC6 certificate. So if they elected to take SPED, then they would get a core special education certificate. Again, they're at the top of the pathways. All right, we can go to the next slide. Alrighty, so scheduled to launch in 2028 is phase 2 of the new core EC6 exams. So the exams will offer candidates 2 additional certificate pathways. So phase 2 will also require candidates to choose either the 4 subtest or 5 subtest exam option. So candidates who select the 5 subtest model will take subtests that cover, of course, math, ELAR, science, and social studies, and then the 5th specialty content or of either ESL or bilingual Spanish proficiency. So once they've passed all of the subtests and met the other requirements, they would be eligible for recommendation for, again, the corresponding certificate. So if they chose core with ESL, then their certificate will be core ESL with STR. All righty. I do see some comments in the chat. I will answer them once we get to the end of my section, if that's okay. All righty. So now that we've discussed our certification pathways, this is how we envision the experience for candidates who want to attain EC6 certification beginning in 2027. So initially, candidates along with their EPP program would decide if they want to earn a base core EC6 certificate or a specialty core EC6 certificate. So if they elect the base core certificate, then an EPP program would admit the candidate under the core with STR EC6 certificate area. And then the candidate would attempt all 4 subtests. If you can do 1 click, that would be great. Of course, candidates can schedule these subtests individually, which is a change from the current core subjects exam. If the candidate passes all 4 of the subtests on the first attempt, then they would be eligible for certificate recommendation. If the candidate does not pass all the subtests on the first attempt, then they would retake the failed subtest, similarly to the current retake policy that we have in place now. 1 more click, please. Thank you. And then candidates will be able to attempt any of the specialty subtests after they've earned an initial core certification. So that means that can be the base core, or if they earned an ESL exam, then they would still be able to attempt any of the other certificate areas. You can click one more time. Just to let you know, they're going to be like 3 clicks, but not now. Okay, so if candidates were to elect to take the 5 subtest model and attempt a specialty area, then they of course would have to be admitted under one of the 4 specialty certificate areas, for example, special education in this case. So they would attempt all 5 of the exams plus special education, subtests. And of course, they can register for them individually. You can do one more click. Just one, thank you. If the candidate passes all 5 of the, no, go back one. Okay, here we go. If the candidate passes all 5 of the subtests on the first attempt, then they will be eligible for the certificate recommendation. If they do not pass all 5 subtests on the first attempt, then they would retake them. And again, similarly to what we do now with the 5 retake rule, they would have those options. Now a click, please. Okay, so here's a caveat or consideration that we're considering. If the candidate elects to take the specialty course certificate pathway, then they of course would attempt all 5 of the exams. However, if they failed any of the subtests for the specialty subtest, then they could also apply, or with their program's approval, apply for a base course certificate. So then they would not have to take that 5th specialty subtest to actually attain core certification. They would just revert back to the base core exam certificate. Alrighty, we can go forward. Okay, so given the feedback, in order to facilitate our vision for the projected new core EC6 certification and testing, there are some considerations that we are factoring into the revision and development process. So these considerations revolve around candidates' testing experience, time, and cost, and emphasize the SBEC's goal of providing flexibility wherever possible. So we will require programs to admit candidates under one of the 5 core EC6 certificate pathways and approve testing for the area admitted. So again, I know I mentioned it before, but side by side, you can see the comparison. So again, we have the base certificate with core with STR EC6, the core fine arts, health, and PE with STR EC6, core special education with STR EC6, core ESL with STR EC6, core bilingual education Spanish with STR EC6. And as you can see, the certificate name has changed, which is why it's no longer core subjects EC6 because of the flexibility. We also would establish a base exam that would allow candidate flexibility. That means they can choose between the base exam or a specialty core certificate and exam model. So this flexibility will also allow candidates who fail the 5th subtest, as I mentioned, the option of being recommended for a core with STR EC6 certificate. And then candidates would be able to attempt any of the 5th subtest after receiving the initial core EC6 certification. So essentially, once you receive any or earn the core certificate, no matter what it is, any of the 5, then you would be able to cert by exam the other specialty areas if the candidate desired to do so. And lastly, the other consideration and major change is that candidates no longer have to sit for the entire exam at once. They can register for the subtest individually. Alrighty, we can move to the next slide. So we just mentioned a couple of considerations. However, given the feedback we've received recently from programs around the new core EC6 exam and certificate pathways, there are more considerations that we're in the process of addressing. So in regards to testing, we want to ensure that the 5 attempt rule aligns with the flexible model for the new core EC6 exam. We also want to, in regards to accountability, ensure that accountability measures allow for the flexible nature of the exam without creating additional barriers for programs. And lastly, in regards to SBEC rules, we want to ensure that the base core exam would be used for multiple certificates and establish rules for EPP accountability measures. Alrighty. So given the implementation of HB2, we recognize the importance of ensuring the field is aware of updates and changes. We share this information to stakeholders via our website, the EPP newsletter, exam one-pagers, and framework webinars. And I know I want to acknowledge that lastly, we do know that we're in the early stages of exam development, so there may be some non-closure as we still are seeking input from stakeholders and working through phases of development. So as we get more information and clarity, we'll share it with stakeholders. So with that in mind, are there resources or avenues of communication we should consider? Are there any other feedback or questions that you have? If so, you can add them to the test development section of the Padlet. And I don't know if there were any questions in the chat that stuck out, but I think DeMarco answered them. And if not, I will go back in the chat now because I'm going to hand it over to DeMarco. So thank you.
Thanks, Kay. So there were a few questions in the chat, y'all. Really appreciate the questions. As Kay shared, we are in the early development stages, and really we're looking at this presentation today as a feedback opportunity. So we'll take your questions, really think hard around some of the policy considerations related to this new exam. But again, as Kay shared, the goal is candidate flexibility as much as we can, taking into consideration time and cost. We've heard that loud and clear from the field, and we want to make sure that we get it right with this redesigned core exam. Okay, next slide. So I will take a brief moment to provide an update related to the Texas Test of Educator Proficiency, otherwise known as TTEP. Next slide. A little bit of background on this assessment. I would say about a year ago in April of 2024, the SBEC directed TEA staff to pursue the development of a Texas-specific teacher performance assessment, really with EPPs leading the charge on this assessment. And then in September of 2024, TEA provided an update related to the strategy to, in a sense, secure an EPP team that would work to develop this assessment. At the previous SBEC meeting in April, we provided an additional update to the SBEC with next steps related to that grant opportunity for EPP programs. And we also shared at that time, we were in the middle of interviews for the grant opportunity. I am excited to share on the next slide that we have actually identified and selected the EPP, the TTEP EPP development team. So the folks you see on the screen will work diligently over the next 2 years to develop all components of the TTEP, including implementation resources. We are really excited for these folks. They had outstanding applications, and they are a great group of people. I do think I saw a few of you on the call today, but just congratulations and just appreciate all the time and effort that you put into the application process and that you will put in over the next 2 years. So with that, y'all, on the next slide, I do want to just surface, Sherry, you were a little bit ahead of me, but I appreciate you thinking about what will be the stakeholder engagement opportunities for this assessment. As is standard for all of our assessments, there are multiple opportunities for stakeholders to engage with exam development, and TTEP will be no different. I thought it might be helpful to talk through the graphic here. Thinking about stakeholder engagement for TTEP, the TTEP EPP content development team will be at the core of the sort of stakeholder engagement. Again, their responsibility will be to design all components of the exam and the implementation resources. They also have responsibilities related to responding to stakeholder feedback, participating in professional learning communities, and engaging in learning calls and focus groups. So again, they will have their work cut out for them over the next 2 years. From there, we'll have opportunities to work with subject matter experts who could be folks from EPPs and also LEAs districts who really have subject matter expertise and will provide a specific lens to the development of the exam. And then from there, we plan to have additional stakeholder engagement opportunities, thinking about stakeholders providing feedback at critical milestones and decision points throughout the assessment. Recognizing that the SBEC and the SBOE both really shared that it's important for us to have a Texas-specific performance assessment with Texas educators leading that charge. And so our stakeholder engagement plan is really going down that pathway. On the next slide, I want to share, and I shared this opportunity at the last EPCE stakeholder meeting, but excuse me, in the very near future, we do have an opportunity to organize a TTEP stakeholder advisory committee. This group will provide feedback at critical decision points and milestones, again, thinking about who is sitting at the table in addition to our EPP development team. This group will be comprised of EPP faculty, staff, and LEA district teachers and leaders. And we anticipate that the application for this stakeholder advisory committee will launch no earlier than August of 2025. We are currently in the drafting stages of that application, but as soon as we are able to share it out with the field, we will share that information with you all as well. Some of you might actually be sitting on that team. But again, this is just one opportunity of many that we plan to have over the next 2 years. As I shared in the chat with Sherry's question, once we finalize more details related to the development timeline for this assessment, I'll also update the group here on just what will happen over the next 2 years. But we're still in the very early planning stages of the assessment. However, we can anticipate a launch in September of 2027. And I do believe that might be it for me, unless I have a secret slide that I forgot about. Okay, handing it over to Kelly.
Good morning, y'all. Happy Friday. It's good to see you all. I also have just some quick updates around the SBEC's recent adoption of the new Chapter 231, Subchapter F, Special Education Personnel Assignment Rules. On the next slide is an overview of the updates that were made in Subchapter F. So the bulk of the board's discussion was around the assignment of special education teacher in 231.701 and those content competency requirements, as well as the development of the Texas Content Competency Worksheet, which we're calling the Texas Worksheet, throughout this process. There were also updates made in the section for teachers of deaf and hard of hearing, some language cleanup here just to update terminology and then align language across other subchapters. So that update was made. And then finally, the SBEC did adopt the new 231.710, which is a new subsection for the assignment of teachers of students who are deafblind. So that deafblind exam and aligned certificate launch in September of this year. And so those updates were made in this most recent round of rulemaking as well. On the next slide, oh, yep, we developed the Texas worksheet. There it is. On the next slide, y'all have seen this slide before, I believe, but we replaced this older rule text in 231 that said that if a teacher was providing content instruction in a special education classroom setting, those folks needed to hold the content cert, or they could utilize the House framework as a flexible option to demonstrate their content proficiency. And so that older rule text has been done away with. The updated rule text, which should pop up, I think, if we click 1 or 2 times. There it is. This new rule text became effective on May 18th and just provided some clarity to the field around which teachers needed to demonstrate content proficiency and then the options that teachers had for demonstrating the content proficiency based on their assignment. So the rule text continues to specify, I think if we click maybe 4 times, we can just get them all up. I should have taken these animations out. The rule text continues to specify that special education teachers need to hold a valid special education certificate. And then also clarified that special education teachers of record are the teachers that need to demonstrate that content proficiency by holding the aligned content certification for their assignment or utilizing the new Texas worksheet, which replaces House. The rule text also gets specific about the requirements within the Texas worksheet for those folks who have already demonstrated their content proficiency on House, directs them to the appropriate section of the worksheet, and then also directs new teachers to the Texas worksheet to the sections where they would need to meet requirements. So hopefully, I know we kind of have a varied group this morning for LEA folks who are thinking about hiring and staffing for the upcoming school year. Hopefully this is helpful. And then also knowing that this rule text does allow for a kind of a broader group of special educators to utilize the Texas worksheet, including interns. Hopefully the implementation resources that we'll go over in the next few slides are helpful for folks. If we move forward one slide, we have an overview. Oh, we have a side-by-side of the old house worksheet and the new house worksheet. So as you all are aware, that older house framework had teachers at the elementary and secondary level. They could demonstrate their content proficiency by holding a generalist certificate or meeting a certain point threshold through a combination of these different like content aligned experiences, so previous teaching experience, college coursework, and PD. The new Texas Content Competency Worksheet is set up very similarly. So elementary special education teachers of record, those teachers in classrooms EC through 5, folks that fall into that bucket need to meet requirements in section C by meeting that 24-point threshold, representing all 4 core content areas. So similar to House, ELAR, math, science, and social studies need to be represented there. And then at the secondary level, teachers grades 6 through 12, those folks need to meet requirements in section D of the worksheet. And then secondary teachers do need to meet an 18-point threshold in each of the core content areas where they're assigned as teacher of record. Y'all also notice there is just that note on the bottom. The Texas worksheet is the flexible option for teachers who don't hold the content certification. So if you have teachers assigned as special education teachers of record who hold their content cert, they won't be interacting with the Texas worksheet. So for instance, if you have special education teachers of record at an elementary level and they hold their core subjects EC6, they don't need to utilize the worksheet. This is for those teachers who don't hold that content certification. The next slide, I think, is the overview of the Texas worksheet. And you can see there we have sort of sections for everyone and then the activities that teachers are generating points from. So very similar to House, college credit hours, previous teaching experience, high quality professional development that's aligned to the content area carries a point value on the worksheet. And then the SBEC did adopt those additional activities with the asterisk as part of the Texas worksheet that were not previously included in-house. So teachers who have gone through a residency, have previous paraprofessional experience, et cetera, those all carry a point value on the new Texas worksheet as well. And then I think if we click twice, did want to call out a couple of sections of the worksheet in particular. So section B, this is for folks who have already demonstrated their content proficiency on the House framework. As long as they meet the administrator attestation in section B, there's no disruption to those folks' ability to serve in their placements. So that's all housed in section B. And then additional flexibilities for first-year teachers and secondary teachers of multiple content areas live within section E of the worksheet as well. On the next slide, so the educator certification page has been updated with a new landing page for special education personnel assignment guidance. So as these rules became effective in May and we are rolling out implementation resources for the field, they're all posted here. So you can see that there is a sort of wraparound text related to the rule text and then an accordion section below, which will continue to be updated over the summer as additional implementation resources are available. On the next slide, the first 2 implementation resources are already posted. So we have an asynchronous rule update webinar that is available for folks to view, as well as an FAQ document. The webinar provides an overview of the rule text and walks folks through the Texas worksheet. And then that FAQ document has questions answered related to the rule text itself, the requirements within different sections of the Texas worksheet, and then also does have a section for EPP considerations, particularly around assigning intern candidates to appropriate placement. So that all lives within the FAQ document as well. On the next slide, oh, there you go. On the next slide, did just want to take a moment to shout out the members of our 231 Implementation Supports Working Group. Many of these folks have been with us since we had many different versions of the Texas worksheet. We've been working on this for the better part of 18 months. And then some new folks that have reviewed the FAQ, provided input, helped us better understand what implementation resources are helpful for folks as these rules become effective. So did want to take a moment and share our thanks and gratitude here. And then as folks on the next slide are reviewing the rule text, reviewing the FAQ, viewing the webinars, did just want to name the 2 additional implementation supports that will be posted to that personnel assignment guidance page. Sometime today, there should be the second asynchronous webinar that's posted. This is specific to the Texas worksheet, and we'll actually walk folks through how to complete the worksheet for a number of different scenarios. So what does it look like to complete the worksheet for a first-year teacher, for a secondary teacher, for an intern? So that should be available soon and will be posted to that personnel assignment guidance page. And then we are collecting additional questions for the FAQ. So any questions that we receive through the FAQ submission form, if that's the QR code right there on the right, any questions that come in through July 21st will be addressed in an updated FAQ 2.0 that will be posted to that personnel assignment guidance page no later than July 25th. So if you have questions, if you have wonderings related to the rule text, the Texas worksheet, please do submit those through that QR code to that Microsoft form. We can make sure to get your questions answered and addressed in that FAQ document. That is all for me. And if there's no questions, or I'll take a look at the chat, but I'll go ahead and turn things over to William.
Hello. So I am going to share screen myself just because of some animations. Let me do that real quick. Kelly, DeMarco, Kay, y'all are on my screen. Can you give me a, okay, great. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is William C. I am the Director of Educator Preparation Continuous Improvement, helping lead the redesign of the continuing approval review in partnership with our EdPrep management team at TEA and TPI US, our contracted vendor. And so here to give you some updates on our first pilot and some opportunities to get a sneak preview of what's going on for our 25-26 pilot, including the redesigned continuing approval review rubric that we will be using in 25-26 for our pilot programs. So very exciting. If you're thinking like, you know what, it's a long meeting, I'm going to sign off early. Don't do it. We got some good updates for you all. So as I am presenting and sharing information, I may have a little bit of trouble checking the chat, although I will try. And Melissa Yoder is also on here. Melissa, you can help me monitor it. But please use the Padlet as well. And any questions that you have coming up about the redesigned continuing approval review process, the redesigned rubric, any connections that you're making, things you're excited about, things that you're wondering about, and any questions you have about the upcoming stakeholder engagement opportunities, please let us know. All right, so you all are very familiar with the effective preparation framework and probably familiar with this slide. So just wanted to ground us in that because this is really where we begin. In 2023 with the launch, 2023 with the launch of the effective preparation framework. So as you all know, this is an aspirational vision for educator preparation by the field, for the field, really capturing the best practices in Texas and across educator preparation that lead to great results for our aspiring teachers and therefore for our Texas students. Split into 5 levers, as you can see there. And the reason that we talk about the EPF as we begin discussing the CAR redesign is it really comes out of a number of other initiatives and big things that are happening with the SBEC in creating the optimal teacher candidate preparation experience And the EPF comes in here talking about car redesign because it was important that the EPF not just be words on a page, not just be a great website that you can go to if you're curious, but something that is actually implemented across the state. So the redesign of the continuing approval review in order to provide quality substantive feedback to programs that could lead to continuous improvement, the EPF really helps ground that redesign of the continuing approval review. All things that many of you, especially if you've been involved in these stakeholder groups before, are likely pretty aware of. Here we have a revamped slide of the vision, the eventual vision, the draft vision. Saying that a lot because I know that some of this will seem, may seem new. It may seem like big changes. So that's why we're continuing to put this in front of stakeholders to see what questions are coming up, see what thoughts happen. But essentially what this slide is doing, it's showing the interconnectedness of continuous improvement from accountability through the continuing redesign, continuing approval review, and through alignment to the EPF. So as you all know, EPPs receive their accreditation status yearly, and currently they are scheduled for a continuing approval review at least every 5 years. Some of that would stay essentially the same. Some of that could shift in our draft vision. So potentially EPPs that required interventions may receive the continuing approval review at different times than just when they are coming up for their 5-year review. And that continuing approval review would be a quality review. And it's currently in our pilot stage and going to be conducted by TPI US, our contracted vendor who has worked with us extensively to create a Texas-based quality review process. Now, how does that actually lead to continuous improvement? Well, in our vision, after the quality review in which the EPP received prioritized action steps, they would have the opportunity to partner with a technical assistance provider to develop an action plan, improve in focus areas, implement that action plan. And in our theory of action, that would then go back to visible, measurable improvement, either in their accreditation status or, if already accredited, in their ACEP index scores. So you can see a few details in our vision around the opt-in for TA provider, a caveat that we are still developing that process to vet third-party providers. But this is probably the first time when thoughts may be popping up for you to enter into the Padlet questions that may be coming up around this vision for the redesign of the continuing approval review. So I'll give you just a second. If you want to switch to the Padlet, drop any questions or reactions there. All right. So while you are finishing up that Padlet thought, that Padlet question, I also wanted to take some time to celebrate and just name who our programs that just completed their quality review as part of our 24-25 pilot are. So several in this room, 5 total programs. We worked to get a balance of programs that were up in 24-25. We worked to get a balance from that list of both ACPs and 4-year colleges and universities. And you can also see we worked for a balance when it came to size, the type of ACP. And we are just so grateful if you're in this room for you, if you're watching this recording, thank you in the future. And even if not, sending you those grateful vibes, because you are going to see that we learned a ton from these programs. So we completed our pilot year 1. You'll see that based on our learnings, it was really important for us to have a second year. It was always a plan. We didn't shift that, but a second year of the pilot because we learned a ton from our first pilot that we were going to implement for our second. So the key priorities, just to ground us for since the beginning for this 24-25 pilot and continuing, are going to be these three things: integrating quality into the continuing approval review. So, for example, whereas in the standard traditional review to check compliance with TAC and statute around required coursework, our team may review syllabi, degree plans, just to ensure that all those topics are covered. In a quality review, a review team would come in, review those syllabi, review those degree plans, but also potentially observe the course, speak to the instructor, talk to students, districts in which students are placed to identify strengths and gaps, in order to really get full context on the impact of that course on candidates. Stakeholder engagement is our second priority. Really wanted to make sure that, similar to the EPF, we were getting plenty of feedback from our Texas stakeholders on how this was working. And pilot participants obviously are a big part of that. And then finally, our last priority was the recruitment and training of Texas reviewers. So we have and are working on our second draft of a Texas-specific rubric. We also wanted to make sure that our reviewers came from Texas LEAs and EPPs. So in 24-25, you'll see that many Texas reviewers went out into the field and will continue in 25-26. So I wanted to ground our update on our pilot 1 learnings in those three things: stakeholder engagement, integrating quality, and our Texas rubric and reviewers. So for stakeholder engagement, our survey, it was important that our huge stakeholder of our 5 pilot programs really felt like they not just got the advantage of having a quality review, but really felt like it gave them an inside look and an ability to give feedback on the process. And so what we found through our surveys was that our EPP leadership, especially, and the main contact for the review, so the person who wasn't just finding out about the review or participating in the review as it was happening, but were part of the planning process for the review with TPI, definitely felt that way. They agreed that they had meaningful ways to provide input and feedback throughout the process. And that was actually one of our strongest responses. When it came to integration of quality, we were looking, and really one of our priority questions and metrics is, do participants actually feel that they get and are able to identify priority improvement areas that are aligned to the EPF? And so in 4 out of our 5 programs, we were excited to see that that was the case. You can see some of that sample feedback that we were really excited to see for integration of quality. For Texas reviewers, we trained a great cohort of reviewers in fall of 2024, and over half of those folks that were trained, even given the limited amount of reviews we did for this pilot, half of those folks have already been able to go out on a review. Some of them are actually even on this call. And we are planning to train about 30 new reviewers in August. And 12 of those, hoping with RSVPs, will actually be current LEA employees. So we're really working to integrate that LEA EPP partnership and perspective into the review. We also, in these 3 priority areas, learned a ton. I don't know why it says number 1, number 1, number 1. Probably should say 1, 2, 3, but I apologize for that. So we're going to go through some of those things that we learned from our first pilot. So potentially one of our biggest takeaways, and if you were part of this pilot, hopefully this resonates with you, but one of our biggest takeaways is that this pilot quality review feels quite different, not just from the traditional continuing approval review, but can also really feel different than a lot that EPPs have engaged in when it comes to receiving feedback at all. So one thing we've learned is that we need to do a really good job and be really thoughtful about how we are framing and preparing our EPPs for this shift. Do we need to provide even more buffer time? Yes, we found that we definitely did, especially when we looked at the experience of our early pilots, and we're working to build that in. But in addition to time, is there additional framing we need to do? Sometimes faculty, large groups of faculty were in the room. Sometimes it was just a really small group. And we found that when faculty were in the room, faculty whose courses had been observed and reviewed, that could hit and land differently than really small groups made up of maybe a couple of folks from EPP leadership. So we really are thinking about the framing and how we can prepare folks for this review in a way that leads to maximum impact. When it comes to integration of quality, we also learned that in this shift from compliance to quality, there's some clarifications that are going to be needed, not just for streamlining, so folks don't feel like they are doing two totally separate reviews, but also to separate, also to make the separation clearer for what it is. So how can we separate, in some ways, the compliance portions, which sometimes can just be, yes, you've done this, no, you have not, from the quality, while also ensuring, like I said, we aren't doubling up the work on EPPs. So this is something that we are looking to do, reducing in some ways the amount of paperwork and submissions that programs are making for compliance in order to help us really keep that focus on quality. And then finally, for our Texas review rubric and reviewers, we got this feedback not just from our new Texas reviewers, but from seasoned TPI reviewers and from programs, that although the rubric was very clearly aligned to the EPF, and there were some things that were super helpful about it, we got some feedback that it really needed additional consolidation and clarity, which is what the meat of this presentation is about. We want to give you a preview of what that rubric looks like, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into the shifts. If you have any takeaways from our pilot learnings or any questions, feel free to drop them in the Padlet, but in the interest of time, I'm going to jump ahead. All right, so we are currently in a stakeholder engagement session and a lot of other things, but we are taking advantage of this time to keep you all informed on the rubric structure. And then if you really perk up as you are looking through this rubric and you realize you want to be a part of a opportunity to take a deeper dive into it, then in July coming up, we will have a stakeholder working group. So this is sort of a higher level preview of some of the changes we've made to the rubric. Some of the language refining and clarity will be done in this working group. So just keep that in mind. All right, so as we are thinking about the shifts that we made to the rubric, I do want to ground a little bit in what the research is telling us are the most important things when it comes to strong teacher preparation. Because as much as we would love to, and some programs may even want to have everything reviewed and everything prioritized, we know that if we prioritize everything, we may end up prioritizing nothing. So when it comes down to it, we are grounding ourselves in three pillars that really have the biggest impact on the candidate experience: the content that they get and the training that they get in their coursework, the practice that they do in classrooms, and then the support that they receive through coaching, feedback, and mentorship. So as we considered how we would ground in those three things, that really helped us consolidate the rubric, which we knew was necessary based on our feedback from reviewers, feedback from programs. We knew that although we had those five review areas, which you can see on the left, that aligned very neatly with the EPF. It mirrored the EPF in a lot of ways. If you know the EPF levers, you can probably make connections between those 5 review areas on the left and the effective preparation framework. We know we needed to align, but we thought we could actually align, keep the 3 pillars on the right front of mind, and really help prioritize what we looked at in the review. So looking at those 3 pillars, what we saw was that those 3 pillars really connected very closely to the last 3 review areas in the first iteration of our rubric, which are also levers 3 through 5 of the EPF, if you're curious. And so what we did is those really became the core components of this new draft of our rubric, with the understanding that the initial 2 review areas from the first draft of the rubric, program performance management and recruitment and selection, still were going to be strong enablers of those core components. So the moment you've been waiting for, here is a draft structure of our new quality review rubric. Review area 1 is quality of candidate training. You can see that has the most indicators underneath, 5. Review area 2 is quality of practice, and review area 3 is the quality of candidate support. Now, I mentioned 5 indicators as if that was a lot, but compared to rubric 1.0, which had about 40 plus indicators, we were very excited in this new version to bring that 40 down to 12. So I'll give you all just a chance to scan through this. I think Melissa's doing, responding somewhat in the chat. So any burning questions that are coming up, feel free to put them in the chat. Wonderings, overall curiosities. Can go in the Padlet. So for the last part of this deep dive, I'm going to let you all in on a little bit of a closer look at each of these indicators. So for each of these slides, it's really just going to be some independent processing time to allow you to take a look at the essential question driving each of the indicators under these 3 review areas. Before that, just really quickly, just wanted to show we are still very aligned to the EPF. Each of our indicators has multiple EPF essential actions aligned to it. All right, so here's review area 1, the quality of candidate training. Take a minute to read through the essential questions driving this review area. Going fast and furious, which maybe encourages some of y'all to join the working group for a closer look. But review area 2, the quality of practice. How do we ensure that that coursework actually lives out in the practice candidates are doing? You can see how performance management and recruitment still live in these indicators as well. And then finally, quality of support. when our candidates are in the field, and even before then, how are we supporting and coaching throughout that process? Just a quick word in connection to Allie's presentation. We have worked to come up with an all-encompassing term in the rubric so that we don't say cooperating mentor host over and over again. And that all-encompassing term currently is clinical support teachers. If you end up having any feedback or wanting to refine that, we would love to hear about it in that working group. The cooperating host mentor, I mean, that comes out pretty quickly. Give you a second more for this last review area. Can't wait to see the chat, but also know Melissa's got it. And I've got 2 minutes left.
Folks who will be joining us for our July rubric review session. I'm telling everyone they need to join us.
Great. All right. I'm going to skip through that closer look. But that is exactly what Melissa just said. We will have a working group that are going to help us review a draft of the new rubric to help us refine language, ensure clarity. So there actually was in the last survey, you were able to put your name there. So if you did that and you want to take it back, I guess you could do it in this survey, but we assume that most folks who are interested way back in March will still be interested. So we'll utilize that list, but also you will have a chance to let us know if you would like to participate in that working group next in this survey. We know that July is a crazy time, both with vacations and also prep for the upcoming academic year. So we will try to get that date out, date or dates, as soon as possible. And just real quick, just so you all know, looking ahead, we do not have the official pilot list finalized, although we have gotten confirmation from a variety of EPPs, and here's what we are looking for. We are looking for programs beyond just who is up for review in the 25-26 school year. We want to make sure that we're actually including programs that do have a lowered accreditation status, so we can really test out that theory of action on quality improvement there. And we're going to keep looking for a balance of colleges, universities, and ACPs, and ensure that we are also looking at ACPs that have that more online only focus as well. All right, came in just in time. I will pass it over to Trenton.
Thanks, William. And if you don't mind, continue to share and advance the slides. I would be very grateful. And good last part of the morning to everyone. My name is Trenton Law, Director of Educator Credentialing for those educators certified in another state or another country seeking to transfer their licensure to Texas. I'll take just a few minutes to give you a high-level preview of revisions to Chapter 231 that I will present in a discussion item at the upcoming SBEC meeting on July 25th. The focus will be on subchapters A through E and G. The revisions in these subchapters will ensure that the educator assignment rules remain clear, current, and aligned with certification standards. Chapter 231 provides guidance on educator certification and assignments across pre-kindergarten through grade 12 settings, organized into 7 subchapters that you see here. Subchapter A outlines general criteria for assignments. Subchapters B through E cover grade-specific assignments, and subchapter G includes paraprofessionals, administrators, and other support roles. Subchapter F addresses special education-related services. However, it will not be included in this discussion item since my colleagues in educator standards and testing recently made extensive updates to the subchapter. Next slide, please. During my time with you in the next few minutes, I'll aim to share a glimpse of the proposed revisions for SBEC consideration and request your feedback on clarity, usability, and effectiveness of the rule chapter. Lastly, I will provide my direct contact information for any feedback that you may have later on following the SBEC meeting discussion in July. Next slide, please. So the proposed revisions include technical edits, such as correcting certificate titles and alphabetizing and renumbering certificates in several sections to improve the clarity and consistency throughout the chapter. We're also expanding the list of certificates in various sections that are appropriate for certain assignments. If all goes as expected, we plan to propose a repeal and replace of subchapter E. This replacement would include the consolidation and renaming of certain divisions, would incorporate new courses approved by the State Board of Education, matching them to the appropriate SBEC issued educator certificate, and add new core subjects with the science of teaching and reading and bilingual education certificates where appropriate. Next slide, please. So I would love to get your feedback to help us refine and improve the rule chapter. These questions will appear in the survey that you will receive following this meeting as questions 16 through 18, and I want to thank you in advance for your feedback. Next slide. After the discussion item is presented to the SBEC on July 25th, if you have any additional feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Thank you. And I will hand it back over to Jessica.
Thanks, Trent. Appreciate it. So to close us out here today, y'all, I'm excited. We're right on time. I'm so impressed. We had so many things on this agenda. I didn't know if we were going to make it, but fantastic job. Just to close us out today, as a reminder, the SBOE meets in 2 weeks' time. During their meeting, the Committee on School Initiatives will review the recent rules adopted by the SBEC, which for this go-around includes Chapter 250, the SBEC's administrative rules, which made some slight updates to the petition for rulemaking processes. And then in addition to their contemplation of that item, I will also provide kind of a standing update on SBEC processes and discussions. As I mentioned at the top of this call, our July SBEC meeting is a 2-day meeting, 1 day of work session and 1 day of meeting. During the work session, as I named earlier, we will spend the day really working to unpack the components of House Bill 2 and Senate Bill 571 that intersect with the SBEC's work. So that will certainly be primetime viewing or attending, I would imagine. And then we, again, as I named, will plan to bring back discussion from that meeting to this stakeholder group in early August to discuss next steps. And then during the board's formal meeting on July 25th, I think a few items of note, again, as we are working to finalize the agenda, would include bringing Chapter 229, the accountability rules, to proposal, and the Chapter 235F, bilingual and special education standards, to adoption. We also would anticipate a few discussion items coming out of the legislative session and also providing updates to the board on our test development processes. With that, I think that's the high-level overview of our upcoming meetings this summer. Again, I know as the teams continue to reinforce, we really appreciate folks asking questions in the chat throughout the meeting today. I know there are times where we weren't able to give answers with specificities, but I can tell you how helpful it is to see your questions. They really help guide the development of our FAQ documents and really can inform the way that we frame our stakeholder engagement discussions going forward. So really appreciate it. At this time, if there's any additional questions that folks have for sake of time, I would really encourage folks to put them in the Padlet, or there's also space in the survey that we are going to put in the chat here in just a second for you all to provide input. Again, we are really trying to ensure that this is a space that folks find meaningful and useful, that they get the information that you need to communicate with your colleagues, and that you feel like you've got an opportunity for meaningful input in the work of the SBEC. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes, Jessica Gonzalez just put a survey link in the chat. If you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback on today's stakeholder meeting, what went well, what could we do better? We're really aiming to engage in continuous improvement. So again, thank you. Hope everyone gets some rest over this summertime, and we look forward to seeing you in all of the various stakeholder sessions we just mentioned throughout the day this afternoon. But thank you all. Appreciate it, and have a fantastic rest of your day.